A very good evening to all our viewers today. Today we have with us Mr. Alex Khumalo, Head Social Performance at Minerals Council South Africa. Within Minerals Council, Alex is tasked with enhancing the industry's developmental impact and outcomes in the mining communities through sharing leading practices among members and through fostering collaboration and partnerships. He is also the independent trustee of the South Deep Education Trust and the South Deep Community Trust. Both were formed by the Goldfields Limited. We would all like to welcome Alex and share his experiences of South Africa and how do you do social inclusion among so much diversity. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Hasha. Good afternoon and good evening, colleagues.
It's an honor to have you with us today. So Alex, you worked extensively in the community in South Africa for close to a decade. How has your journey been?
It's been very difficult, Hasha, because of just the challenges that are there. But from a personal perspective, it's been exciting because it's allowed me to do something that I'm passionate about. And I have found an environment where there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of support for the kind of work that I do, because certain things that need to be done do actually manifest themselves in mining areas, which is where really my focus is.
Wonderful. So, Alex, the key industries that you have worked with are into mining, such as Anglo Platinum and now Minerals Council in South Africa. What are the key challenges that you faced with soul illusion that you must have observed on the ground reality?
Well, without defining social inclusion, I think it's quite important to note the key elements that we need to look into when we talk about social inclusion. Is the issue of relationships, is the issue of advocacy, is the issue of identity, and in communities there's also an element of shared experiences, and you also then have the issue of how, as an outsider, and this is now as a mining company, you move into a community and try and become one together with that community. For me, in the minerals industry, in the mining industry, especially in South Africa, the key challenges to social inclusion have included things as employment, or rather lack of employment opportunities. South Africa has got one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Officially, I think we are standing at about 37%, but that's a narrow definition. If you take the broader definition, that figure jumps up to around 45, 46%, which is quite high. And when it comes to the youth in particular, you find that there are some mining areas, mining regions where youth unemployment is in the region of 50 to 60%, which is totally unacceptable. The other area where social inclusion faces challenges is the issue of education and skills. In the South African context, we have a long history that you all know of in terms of the politics, but also there's been unequal access to quality education. So for us, the issue of education becomes very, very important, and also the issue of skilling. And skills is always a tricky one, because now we are talking about 4 IR skills. In the southern context, in rural areas where mining takes place, how do you begin to talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution when, in fact, the 3rd Industrial Revolution missed those people and they were left behind? The other one is more of your economic inclusion, not just financial, but really economic inclusion that would allow people to be able to determine their own destiny. And without access to economic factors, it becomes almost impossible to do so. Naturally, the next one that you need to look into is, although South Africa is a democracy, 28 years into it, there's still challenges around social and political inclusion. South Africans do tend to view politics as an event that takes place every 5 years when it's time to go to the polls and vote. But that's not how it works. To ensure that we deal with the daily challenges, we need to be socially and politically engaged on an ongoing basis, and that is a key challenge. The other one being a traditional community by and large, although half of the population is almost urbanized. There's issues around gender equality. And in the South African context, unfortunately, we also have a challenge with gender-based violence. And that, for us, takes high proportions in terms of what we observe in poverty-stricken communities. For us, that is a key challenge that we need to be dealing with. And each and every mining company that I work with has a program in place to deal with gender-related issues. The other one, of course, especially from where I sit, is that of ensuring that, you do have resilient communities. And resilience can only be achieved if, that is driven by communities. So for me, community-driven resilience is quite important. And it also talks to the fact that quite a number of our communities don't have a shared vision. Individuals, who have got the loudest voices are often heard more than those that don't have louder voices. So women, for instance, are not as heard as much in traditional communities. So it is important for me that, there's that whole issue of the sense of community, so that, communities can pull together, to determine their own destinies. Obviously, the other one, and in South Africa, it is legislated even, is the issue of the inclusion of persons with disabilities. You will find that in mining in particular, it is very, very difficult to recruit and retain persons with disabilities due to the nature of our environment. But we are working hard to ensure that, we do find space to include persons with disabilities, not just, in office environments, but even outside of the office environment. Hasha, that's all that I think that, I wanted to highlight around the key challenges that we face in South Africa in the mining space when it comes to social inclusion.
Right, that's pretty informative and very detailed. Alex, moving to the next question. South Africa is one of the most mineral-rich countries. Still, the Department of Statistics in South Africa states that 49.2% of the population over the age of 18 falls below the poverty line. 1 in 5 South Africans live in extreme poverty. And as you earlier mentioned about economic infusion, what could be the prime reason, and how do you see that apart from just the minerals industry, how can everyone else also contribute towards upgrading or the community who are economically backward, and especially the youth?
Hasha, as I mentioned earlier, South Africa has got a long history of inequality, but that is behind us. We are 28 years into the new dispensation, and we need to start looking forward. But one of the key challenges that we are facing is the fact that although we are mineral rich, South Africa has not taken advantage of the downstream activities that come with mining. So a lot of what we produce is primary products. So we mine iron ore, for instance, in the Northern Cape province, and we ship it out, to countries that process iron ore. It could be China and some of the other East Asian countries. So for us, we really haven't taken full advantage of the fact that we are a mineral-rich country. So really, beyond mining, beneficiation for us has not been happening. There's a number of reasons for that, but that's by and large one of the challenges that we are facing as a country, where we are failing to add more value to the minerals that we produce. That's the one. The other one is that with a very young population, our pyramid is very, very flat in terms of the population. So you do have, as you mentioned, a lot of people who are under the age of 21 in this country. And as you would naturally see, they are not economically active because some of them are at school, but quite a number of them are neither at school or at any other training institution, which means that there is a gap in terms of the economic base that we can have as a country. As a result, we find that the poverty is widespread. It's not only in mining communities, but it's throughout the entire country. That challenge we continue to face, and we do have a challenge of inequality. If you look at our Gini coefficient, we are very close to Brazil, which is also a very unequal country. And I think the challenge for us lies in one, ensuring that we improve economic opportunities for people. But again, this is a vicious cycle, because without adequate education and the skills that are required, the ability to make maximum use of our natural endowment in terms of resources, we cannot beat the triple challenge of unemployment, of poverty, and inequality. So it is important, I think, as South Africans, that we need to pull together and be able to beat this triple challenge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The whole issue around extreme poverty, obviously, will be with us for a long time. I mean, we subscribe, to the SDGs, which I will talk to a little later. But at the end of the day, mining alone cannot do this. So it is important that we do have a multi-sectoral collaborative approach that ensures that we can do more with the resources that we mine in South Africa.
That's a great input. Now, you are working in the mineral-rich industry, and there are a lot of laborers who work over there. There are many human rights challenges that this particular industry faces, and that need not be only in South Africa, but worldwide. How are your countries and how is your industry in South Africa addressing this problem? And what kind of human rights guidelines do you all implement?
No, thanks, Asha. Mining does come with its curse, as they call it, the resource curse. But as a country, we do subscribe to the International Bill of Human Rights. In fact, our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, they are crafted along that basis. Naturally, our Constitution also is something that we look up to. We do have a highly unionized environment. So we do look at the ILO fundamental principles and the rights at work. But more importantly, as a member of the United Nations, we also subscribe to the UNGPs, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. Quite a number of our companies are global in nature, so they do also have to deal with that issue wherever they do operate. In addition to that, as Minerals Council in South Africa, with the Constitution as the apex legislation that guides us, we have identified some priority areas that we need to focus on as an industry to ensure that we support the protection of human rights. One, it is around the issue of environmental management and conservation. As we know, mining is not necessarily the most environmentally friendly industry, but done correctly and done with this very notion in mind that we need to preserve human rights, it is important that we conserve the environment and make sure that we manage it very well. The other one is that the mining industry can be unsafe and has a history of being unsafe. We have heard in many countries where several lives are lost in the industry. In South Africa, for instance, we are working very hard to achieve zero harm. So health and safety is a key area of focus for us because it can have a huge impact on human rights. The other one is also around governance and ethics. That is often overlooked, but it is important that if you operate in an ethical manner, it is a lot more easier to preserve and protect human rights. The other one, obviously, is the issue of security. We do, as an industry, work with precious metals as well. So it is important that in terms of how we go about protecting those resources, we bear in mind that there are human rights elements that could be involved. The other one that we do need to look at as an industry is the issue of transformation, and this is where it takes us back to the history of South Africa, where mining did play a big part in shaping the political landscape. So there's a lot that we need to do in terms of transformation, in terms of management control of the assets in mining, in terms of access to opportunities for women. So gender equity is quite important, but also in terms of communities where we operate, because mining is probably the only industry that can establish a town by just starting to dig a hole in the ground. So for us, it is quite important that the issue of transformation in as far as communities are concerned is prioritized. The other one, of course, is the issue of the whole notion of human rights in the workplace. That for us is absolutely important, because if we do not take the very small steps that that underpin the promotion and preservation of human rights, and for us that begins in the workplace. So it is important that we do ensure that we inculcate the culture of human rights at the workplace, especially because quite a number of mining operations are in rural areas where people may not necessarily be aware of their rights. So it is important that this becomes an intrinsic approach to the preservation of human rights. The other one, also obviously, that we need to focus on in as far as human rights are concerned is the issue of land use and possible resettlements. When we do begin mining, there are instances where agricultural land is suddenly lost to communities and becomes mining land. And sometimes that land becomes sterilized post-mining, simply because it can no longer be utilized due to either pollution or environmental degradation. So it is important that we take into account the issue of land use, have a very balanced approach when it comes to that. And where we need to resettle communities, we need to make sure that they are resettled in a manner that allows them to continue thriving, not just as individual households, but as communities. Let's remember that each and every household is part of a broader community. So it is important that we bear in mind the issue of human rights when it comes to that. And one of the ways of promoting human rights is to ensure that we do have a grievance mechanism, where when communities are not happy with a particular mining operation, they do know the steps that they can take to raise their concerns. They do know who they can go to for assistance. And for us, that is absolutely important, because it allows people to be heard by each and every mining operation. Hasha, I think those are the key focus areas that we as a Minerals Council in South Africa are focusing on, with a view to ensuring that our members promote and protect human rights.
Thank you for sharing about the practices that you all are following in South Africa in order to ensure human rights. Now, South Africa is also a melting point for people of different ethnicity and race. What are the opportunities and challenges for social inclusion, and how do you ensure that you get the social license to operate in a particular location or district where you're planning to go ahead for mining related activities?
No, thanks, Hasha, for that. I mean, so many as in some other countries around the world. But I mean, that said, it just reinforces what you're saying, that we do have a number of ethnicities and a number of races in the country, which obviously creates challenges and obviously opportunities for social inclusion. But the way that I like to approach this is that challenges are really no longer around the issue of prejudice and stereotyping. I think challenges come more in the form of socio-economic deprivation. Social capital and political networks play a big part in perpetuating the challenges that we have as a country when it comes to ethnicity and race. As you would know, a lot of clientelism develops as a result of networks. While I am not for clientelism, but I do see the role that social capital plays and the role that political networks play. So it is important that we we take those challenges that are brought by the lack of those avenues and turn it on its head and ensure that we can open up those networks so that they can be more inclusive. Therefore, creating more opportunities for creativity and innovation. South Africa is we call ourselves a rainbow nation. We come from different walks of life, and I think there's always scope for creativity and innovation. In fact, globally, you will find that most of the successful teams in workplaces are the ones that are multidisciplinary, because people bring in different approaches to solving a particular problem, and that enriches the thought processes that are part and parcel of finding that solution. So South Africa still has a lot of untapped talent, and I think with a more quality education, more access to that education, and the appropriate type of skills that take cognizance of the fact that things are moving forward. People talk about the fourth industrial revolution in the South African context, especially in mining. It is important for us to also understand that mining is beginning to turn in terms of how we do what we do. The whole issue of bricks and mortar in mining is changing. We are looking more into robotics. We are looking more into using technology to continue mining safely and more profitably. So for me, it is important that education is enriched and that we actually deliver the right kind of skills to open up more opportunities in the social inclusion landscape.
Excellent. That's very well put across now. Do you see that the government, national and the international agencies, need to introduce some kind of policies, or are there some existing policies in order to ensure social inclusion?
All right, Hasha, I didn't hear the rest of the question, but I think I got the gist of it. At a national level, we have a number of policies that we have developed. So we have a very good understanding of what we need to do to overcome some of these social inclusion challenges. So as part of developing the National Development Plan, which has got a 2030 vision, we've got to understand all of the key challenges that we need to overcome. At the global level, there's a number of things that have happened, but I think most of us see the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, as probably one set of guidelines that can guide us in terms of what it is that we need to do. So if you look at all of the 17 SDGs that are out there, you can see exactly what it is that needs to be done to be able to counter the challenges that we are facing. But you can't talk about social inclusion when the approach is not inclusive. So you can't have an international NGO bringing solutions to a country like South Africa or Bangladesh or Jamaica. It's got to be embraced by the locals. It's got to be driven by the local people. And so it is important that even in our context, where we've got the National Development Plan, it is important that we empower people at grassroots level to be able to drive this process forward so that they can ultimately determine their own destiny. So for me, it is absolutely important that, when we talk social inclusion, the processes that we adopt that are supposed to help us achieve that inclusion are themselves inclusive. They ensure that everyone else is absolutely involved in determining that particular destiny. And in our context, it is important that we empower people to be able to do that. You can't have partners that are unequal. That partnership would not work. It would crack simply because you would have one stronger partner and a weaker partner. It is important then that in dealing with these issues, we do have partners that are equally empowered to be able to contribute in the determination of that destiny. And for me, there can be no social inclusion without inclusive processes from the very beginning.
Thank you for sharing the inputs. Now, are there any formal education system on CSR and sustainability in South Africa, or and do you think that it is required? If so, what kind of subjects do you see that would enable the manpower in South Africa more integrated in responsible business leadership?
Harsha, it is important that we look at this in a comprehensive manner. I mean, currently we are all, using the ESG, the environment, social, and governance net, as one all-encompassing thing. I think we all agree that it is important that we look at all of those things, but for me, there's one key cog in all of this, and I think it is something that we can all relate to, and it is the issue of ethics, because for me, what has gone wrong in our world primarily stems from our inability to embrace and incorporate ethics into all of our social, economic, environmental, and governance landscapes. For me, that is the basic foundation that we need to ensure that it is in place. Everything else that flows from there would probably flow better, and it would allow us, to conduct ourselves in the business space, in the social space, in the environmental space, in the governance space, in a much better manner if we do embrace, the whole issue around ethics.
Thank you, Alex. We do have some students from South Africa, and thus I asked this question to you. What would be your final message to all our viewers who are watching this program right now or who would watch the recorded session later?
Harsha, the global challenges can seem very overwhelming. If you go from east to west, there's various kinds of challenges. I mean, currently we are facing, the war in the Ukraine. Not long ago, we had famine in Ethiopia. Not long ago, we had dictators in South America. So for me, it is important to remember that, no matter how big a challenge is, and as a South African, I always say that, there's two ways of eating an elephant. One is one bite at a time. And that talks to, the fact that, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But in the context of the elephant, under the African sun, one bite at a time would mean that, the elephant would rot before you can eat it. So it is important as well, to think about, eating an elephant in large numbers. Get all of the right partners, people who are like-minded, work with them, collaborate, form teams. Fortunately now, global networks are opening up. It doesn't have to be a team, around your own community. It can be a global team. Form those teams, begin to deal with the global challenges, have these debates, and work towards a common goal. I think, we all want humankind to prosper. But how do we get there? We can only find a way of pulling together by openly debating these issues, by breaking down the barriers that keep us apart, by stopping working in silos, but beginning to work as a collective and making use of our ability to connect and interact on a global landscape. It is always humbling to travel around the world. That's one of the things that I do as a pastime. I've been to some 57 countries around the world. And it is always humbling, to go to a country and come back to South Africa and say, geez, I thought our challenges were significant. But what I observed over there really, really humbled me. But what humbled me even more is to see how different people deal with their challenges rather than sitting back and folding their arms. So for me, the message is very simple. We've got lots of challenges. Some of them are localized, some of them are global. But we cannot sit back. Let's collaborate. Let's talk to each other. Let's have these debates. I'm sure that we'll find solutions for all of the challenges that we are facing. Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us and sharing so much of the practices of human rights, social inclusion, and social license to operate, and you are striving to ensure social inclusion in South Africa. It is highly commendable. Thank you so much for joining us today for our show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.